When the final out was recorded and the stadium lights began their slow dimming sequence over Dodger Stadium on Thursday night, almost every player had already made their way through the tunnel and into the clubhouse. The game was over. The crowd was filing out. The field crew had begun their post-game work. This is the routine. This is how every baseball night ends. But Shohei Ohtani did not move. According to multiple sources with direct knowledge of what occurred after the final out, Ohtani remained seated in the Dodgers dugout long after his teammates had disappeared down the tunnel. He did not speak to anyone. He did not reach for his phone. He sat completely still, facing the field, in a dugout that had gone from full to empty in a matter of minutes. And according to those who witnessed this moment, he stayed there for a duration that went well beyond anything that could be explained by simple fatigue or post-game reflection. Nobody asked him to leave. Nobody approached him. And according to multiple sources present at the stadium that night, even the ground crew, who have seen everything across years of working that field, paused when they noticed who was still sitting there and what his expression looked like. What happened next, and what has since emerged about why Ohtani was still in that dugout when the lights began to go out, has sent a ripple through the baseball world that goes far beyond anything a box score could ever capture. Because this story is not really about one player sitting alone in a dugout after a game. It is about three Japanese stars, Ohtani, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, and Mariners pitcher Kodai Senga, and a quiet act of solidarity that left everyone who witnessed it, including the Mariners manager, completely without words. To understand what happened Thursday night, it is necessary to go back several days. According to multiple sources with knowledge of events inside both the Dodgers and Mariners organizations, the tension surrounding Japanese players in Major League Baseball had been building quietly beneath the surface of the public narrative for weeks. Not in the explosive, visible way that generates immediate headlines. But in the slower, more corrosive way that people inside clubhouses feel long before anyone outside them does. According to those familiar with the situation, comments had been circulating, both publicly and within certain corners of the sport, that framed the relationships between Japanese players in MLB in a manner that several people inside the game found deeply disrespectful. The suggestion, repeated in various forms across different platforms and conversations, was that Japanese players in the league operated as a protected class. That they covered for each other. That the organizations around them bent rules and standards to accommodate their presence in ways that would never be extended to players from other backgrounds. The phrase that kept surfacing, the one that had reportedly reached Ohtani, Yamamoto, and Senga directly, was a version of the same ugly question. How do the Japanese protect each other? According to multiple sources, each of the three players became aware of this narrative independently. And according to those close to all three, the reaction from each of them was the same. Not anger. Not public denial. Not a social media response or a statement delivered through a representative. Silence. Followed by something far more deliberate. Yoshinobu Yamamoto had been carrying extra weight for weeks. According to multiple sources inside the Dodgers organization, Yamamoto had been pitching through a period where the offensive support around him had been inconsistent, where the margin for error on the mound had been razor-thin, and where the internal and external scrutiny on his performances had been more intense than at almost any point since he arrived in Major League Baseball. Through all of it, Yamamoto said almost nothing publicly. He took the mound every fifth day. He competed. He gave his team a chance to win. And according to those who watched him closely during this period, the composure he maintained in the face of that scrutiny was not the product of indifference. It was the product of an enormous and deliberate effort to carry his responsibilities without transferring the weight of them onto anyone around him. According to multiple sources, Ohtani noticed this. He had been watching Yamamoto closely, not as a teammate monitoring performance but as someone who genuinely understood what the younger pitcher was absorbing and how much it was costing him to carry it as quietly as he was. And Kodai Senga, despite being on the opposing roster, was navigating his own version of the same storm. The Mariners pitcher had faced his own wave of scrutiny this season, questions about his durability, about his consistency, about whether the player the organization had invested in was truly capable of delivering at the level they needed. According to those close to Senga, the external noise had grown louder in recent weeks. And like Yamamoto, he had chosen to absorb it rather than redirect it. 3 players. 3 separate organizations. 3 separate battles. But according to multiple sources familiar with all 3 situations, the common thread running through each of their experiences was impossible to ignore. What happened after Thursday's game began, according to multiple sources, with a conversation that took place before the first pitch was ever thrown. According to those with knowledge of the exchange, Ohtani and Senga, despite being on opposing teams, found a moment before the game in which something passed between them that those who observed it described as deeply significant without being dramatic in any visible way. No long conversation. No extended exchange. According to eyewitnesses, it lasted less than a minute. But according to those who were close enough to observe it, what was communicated in that brief moment established something that both players carried with them through every inning that followed. Yamamoto was aware of this exchange. According to multiple sources, all 3 players had been in communication in the days leading up to this series in a manner that went beyond the ordinary contact between players who share a native language and a professional background. Something had been discussed. Something had been decided. And according to those familiar with the situation, what unfolded Thursday night was not spontaneous. It was intentional. On the field, all 3 players performed in ways that generated their own conversation. Ohtani was locked in from his first at-bat, not the explosive, crowd-lifting version of Ohtani that generates instant highlights, but the quieter, more surgical version that opposing pitchers fear even more. Every at-bat was deliberate. Every decision at the plate communicated something about his mental state that went beyond the individual game situation. Yamamoto, pitching for the Dodgers, was described by multiple sources who watched him warm up as carrying a different kind of energy than usual. Looser. More settled. As though something that had been sitting on his shoulders for weeks had been quietly removed before he ever took the mound. And Senga, pitching for the opposing side, competed with a ferocity that his own teammates reportedly described afterward as the most focused they had seen him all season. 3 players on opposite sides of a competitive game. But according to everyone who was paying close enough attention, something was pulling in the same direction underneath all of it. When the game ended and the stadium began to empty, it was Yamamoto who moved first. According to multiple sources, instead of following his teammates directly into the clubhouse, Yamamoto paused at the entrance to the tunnel and looked back toward the field. He stood there for several seconds without moving. And then, according to eyewitnesses, he walked back to the top step of the dugout and sat down beside Ohtani. Nobody instructed him to do this. No coach suggested it. According to those present, it was entirely self-directed, one player choosing to sit beside another in a moment that required no explanation because the meaning of it was already completely clear to everyone who observed it. And then, approximately 4 minutes later, according to multiple sources with direct knowledge of what occurred, Kodai Senga, having completed his own post-game responsibilities with the Mariners, appeared at the edge of the field. He walked toward the Dodgers' dugout without hesitation. He sat down on the other side of Ohtani. 3 players. 2 different teams. 1 dugout. Sitting together in a stadium that was almost completely dark, in a silence that none of them felt any need to fill with words. The Mariners manager, according to multiple sources, was informed of what was happening on the field by a member of his coaching staff. And according to those present when he received that information, his reaction was not what anyone expected. There was no irritation at the unusual nature of the situation. There was no procedural concern about a member of an opposing team remaining on the field after the game had concluded. According to eyewitnesses, the Mariners manager went completely quiet for a long moment after hearing what was happening in that dugout. And then, according to those present, he said only that sometimes you see something in this game that reminds you what it is actually about. He did not elaborate. He did not need to. Several members of his coaching staff, according to multiple sources, were visibly moved by his response. Because everyone in that room understood that what was happening on that field had nothing to do with the game that had just been played and everything to do with something that runs far deeper than baseball. When the 3 players finally stood and made their way off the field, the stadium was almost entirely dark. The ground crew had stopped working. The last remaining stadium staff moved quietly around the edges, giving the moment the space it deserved without anyone instructing them to do so. No cameras captured it clearly. No microphones were present. And according to those who witnessed it, not a single one of the three players looked back as they walked toward their separate tunnels. They did not need to. What had been communicated in that dugout, without a single public word, without a press conference, without a statement released through any representative, was understood by everyone who had been present. And in the days that followed, as the story of what happened Thursday night began to spread through the baseball world, the reaction from inside the game was remarkably consistent. Nobody asked how the Japanese protect each other after that night. Because everyone who mattered had already seen the answer.